Okay, so this tutorial is just on reviewing how to work with fractions for those of you that have forgotten. The first thing that's really important with fractions, it's a lot easier if you convert all mixed fractions into improper fractions. And just a quick reminder, to do that, you're going to take the larger number or the whole number, and you're going to multiply it by the bottom number or denominator, then you're going to add the top number or numerator. And then after you do that, you're going to keep the bottom number or denominator because the size of the pieces doesn't change. So 2 and 1/3, all you're going to do is 2 times 3, which is 6, and then add the 1, and that will become 7/3. For 4 and 2/5, 4 times 5, which is 20, plus 2, which is 22/5. So that should always be your first step if a question has mixed fractions in it. So moving on, we're going to just quickly review how to add two fractions together. So it's really important with fractions to remember that when adding fractions, you need to get a common denominator. So in this case, if I'm looking at 3 and 5, I need to think of the smallest number that both 3 and 5 goes into, and that will be 15. So both of them are going to have a common denominator of 15. And then all you need to do is ask yourself, how did I go from 3 to 15? So 3 times 5, so whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top, and that will become 10. And then 5, I got 15 by multiplying by 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, and that will become 12. So once I've changed each fraction so that they have a common denominator, and one thing that's really important, some people remember to change the bottom and forget to change the top. So whenever the bottom changes, the top has to change also, and then you haven't changed the fraction. And so now all we need to do is add the two numerators together. So 10 plus 12 is 22/15. And you always want to simplify your answers, but you can leave them as improper fractions. So this answer would actually be my final answer because there is no number that goes into both 15 and 22, and I can leave it as an improper fraction. So subtracting works exactly the same way. So I'm going to work to get a common denominator. In this case, the common denominator of 8 and 5 is going to be 40. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 8 times 5 will give me 40. So 7 times 5, I'll put 35 there. And 5 times 8 gave me 40. So 3 times 8 gives me 24. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract. So 35 minus 24 is 11. And I'm going to keep the denominator the same. I'm always going to check to see if I can simplify, but in this case, I can't simplify, so that is my final answer. I've just added this example just so that you see how one with mixed fractions works. So my first step is going to be to make them improper. So 2 times 2 is 4, 4 plus 1 is 5, so 2 1/2 becomes 5 halves, and 1 times 3 is 3 plus 2 is also 5, so 1 2/3 becomes 5/3. Now in this case, even though my numerators are the same, I still need to get a common denominator, which is going to be 6. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. 5 times 3 becomes 15. And 3 times 2 gives me 6. So 5 times 2 will be 10. And then I'm going to just simplify. 15 minus 10 is 5/6, and that will be my final answer. So for multiplying, you can get a common denominator, but you don't have to. And my recommendation to you would be to not, because if you get a common denominator, you're going to be working with really big numbers. And when you're multiplying, you don't need to have a common denominator. There's a couple ways that you can multiply. So I'm going to show you two different questions, and I'm going to do them in two different ways. So the one on the left, I'm going to do by simply multiplying. So all I'm going to do is figure out what 18 times 4 is, and in that case, it's going to be 72. So I'm just going to write that down. And I'm going to figure out what 12 times 6 is, and I will write that down. And that's actually also going to be 72. I guess when I put this problem together, I didn't really think it through, but that's okay. And then after I multiply my tops and I multiply my bottoms, I'm just going to simplify. So in this case, it actually simplifies to 1. Now the method on the right, I'm going to use a canceling method. A lot of you like to call it cross-canceling. It's not called cross-canceling, it's just called canceling. And when you cancel, what you're doing is you're looking for something that goes into both a number on the bottom and a number on the top. So for example, 5 goes into 10 twice. So I can cancel out the 5. 5 goes into 5 once, and 5 goes into 10 twice. I can also cancel the 12 and the 15 because there is something that goes into both of those. 3 goes into 12 4 times, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. When you are canceling, a couple things that you have to remember. You can cancel anything on top with anything on the bottom. It does not have to be diagonal. So I could have canceled the 10 and the 15 as long as it's a top with the bottom. Once I've done my canceling, now I can just multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. So in this case, I get 8 over 5. And because I've canceled, my answer will be simplified. So I can actually leave that as my final answer. So play around with both methods and see which one you prefer. It really doesn't matter. So finally, we're going to look at dividing. The one thing that people forget with dividing is that the main rule is to multiply by the reciprocal. So the first thing you have to actually do is turn it into a multiplication question. So the division sign becomes multiply. The reciprocal of 5 over 6 is 6 over 5. You always change the second one, the one that follows the sign. And then we're just going to get the answer. Now, if you like the canceling method, which I personally like, let's look for anything that you can cancel. So in this case, 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. I cannot cancel this 6 and this 3 because they're both on the top. Remember, it has to be something on the top with something on the bottom. Now I can get my answer. 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 times 5 is 10, and that's my final answer. I threw the one on the right in here just because some of you have been getting confused with just a whole number. Remember, 3 by itself means 3 over 1. And if it helps you to write that, please do so. So again, first step is to rewrite it as a multiplication problem. So the reciprocal of 3 over 1 is 1 over 3. And then you're just going to multiply. When I look at this one, there's actually nothing I can cancel. So I'm just going to multiply the tops. 5 times 1 is 5. And multiply the bottoms. 2 times 3 is 6. And that is my final answer. So that's just a quick review before we get into working with negative fractions. It's just a quick review of your fractions. Nothing new, just kind of reviewing everything you've learned before. If that was not clear to you, please speak to me and come in for extra help and we can go through it in more detail.